Major General Engel.
It's a national security issue when an impact is significant when it causes a noticeable, even if temporary, degradation of one of the elements of U.S. national power. We used a slightly different set than what you heard this morning. We used military, economic, geopolitical, and social cohesion of the United States, which is a little bit different than the more conventional one used today of information. And the reason we did that is we looked at events like Katrina, which really kind of almost start to rip at the fabric of U.S. society as indications of where climate change can actually have national security ramifications domestically. We recognize that that might take place because it either directly impacts the U.S. homeland, as in the case of Katrina, or because it influences a major U.S. ally, or because it influences a major military or economic partner of the United States. And the other path by which that might occur is because it will indirectly consume U.S. resources. Actually, if we looked at this process itself that we used to develop this, it was a three-part process. The first part was looking at the science, trying to understand the science. Then once we understood the science of climate change, figuring out what it was going to do in a given geographic area, we tried to concentrate this at the state level because we thought that was very important for what we wanted to look at. And then finally, we had a group of, we were assisted in that by a group of regional experts who helped us define that. And then finally, after that, we, when intelligence community, wrote our own assessment of what we thought it meant from a national security point of view. So three parts: understand the science, get some outside experts, and then look at it from intelligence community point of view. The foundations for doing this was really assisted by a great deal of outstanding work done before us. Previously mentioned today was the study done by the Center for Naval Analysis, which kind of laid the same kind of parametric way to approach the problem. And then another study that influenced us was the Center for Strategic and International Studies and Center for New American Security, of which Jay participated, which again looked at the same time frame we did. Along the way, we did look only out to 2030, and it had somewhat to do with the risk judgments that Jay was talking about. We just did not want to get in the business of trying to look at some of the more extreme climate events that might happen. But I think you could legitimately say that was a little bit of a conservative view, and I think Jay's critique there is probably legitimate. We did decide to do that for other reasons also, because the geopolitical environment is very difficult to predict on the further way out. We did not, from an intelligence community point of view, look at the science of climate change, try to understand what was driving it, and but we did rely upon scientific reports that were done, either those prepared through the IPCC process or others peer-reviewed literature. So what were the results? Overall, we drew the conclusion that climate change would have wide-ranging impacts for U.S. national security, principally because it would aggravate existing problems that already exist, such as poverty, social tensions, environmental degradations, and ineffectual leadership and weak political institutions. Essentially, this was a question about state stability and causing state instabilities that would affect U.S. interests. We recognized that climate change alone was probably not going to trigger a failure in any particular state out to 2030, but it would potentially contribute to both intra and interstate conflicts, most likely over water, was our judgment. We saw three paths through which this would occur. One path was changes in water availability, which would force migrations of people. Another path would be changes in water and temperature, which would cause degradation in agricultural productivity, again forcing people to move. And if you look at that, those two principally affect the developing world, where they are dependent upon subsistence agriculture and where lots of movements may take place. The third path we saw was through a damage to valuable infrastructure caused by extreme weather events, and in that case it impacts most of the developed world, because the developed world is that part of the world that has the valuable infrastructure. Overall, I would say since we did the report, we've picked up an additional view that we think climate change will have impacts through changing disease patterns, both for human beings, animals, and plants. Following our research, we embarked upon an effort to look at climate change in 6 countries or regions of the world, and we picked these because they were things that kind of intrigued us as we did this first parametric look around the entire world with the NIA. We picked Russia, China, India. And principally we picked those countries because they were either major economic countries or significant geopolitical powers. And then we also looked at North Africa, Mexico and the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia and the Pacific Island states. We picked those regions because those regions were areas where if we did see significant movements of people, we judged it would affect either the United States directly, Mexico and the Caribbean, major U.S. partners, Europe from North Africa, or Australia and New Zealand from Southeast Asia. We've finished those studies. They're slowly being put on our website, and you can go take a look at them. As I said, we have a 3-phase process, and we're going to put the first 2 phases of those studies on our website. We have about, I think, 7 or 8 of them up there right now, ultimately getting towards 12, where we talk about reports we had done for us on the science side and the results from our external experts. Finally, just to talk a little bit about some of our other research that we've done. We did an Arctic geopolitical game that looked at the significance of the opening of the Arctic. We did this in partnership with, this was just a fascinating exercise, because unlike most of our geopolitical games, we go out and hire a bunch of rich consultants in the Washington, D.C. area to play various parts of the world. And in this case, we actually had participants from the countries themselves engage in the game with us. And we did the game in London, and we looked at what does it mean as the Arctic opens up among the various Arctic states, and it was a fascinating exercise. And one of the most significant takeaways is that all the states in the Arctic, coastal states particularly, want to work together to try and work Arctic issues, and they have a different preference for the Arctic Council and the International Maritime Organization. We also did a study looking at states most at risk, and that study was done for us by, again, the Center for Naval Analysis. Ron did that for us. It was a parametric study looking at combination of what we saw in future risk from climate, as well as what we saw in terms of the resilience inherent in some of the states. And it probably comes as no surprise that the area most likely to be at risk from that was Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa in particular was the hardest hit. Let me conclude then with our science wish list. At the top level, as the intelligence community looks at climate change and national security, it's a 2-part problem. And it follows the same fundamental way we deal with any kind of intelligence question. There's a collection portion of it, and there's an analysis portion of it. The collection portion of it is really quite different. It comes probably as no great state secret that most of what involved in intelligence collection is indeed stealing secrets, stealing someone else's secrets. In this case, what we really look for is science. It is the science that tells us what the future is going to be from a climate point of view, and then we can extrapolate that and what it's going to mean in terms of energy, what it's going to mean to agricultural productivity, what it's going to mean to vulnerability of infrastructure. Those are not inherently state secrets, but nonetheless, they're things and skills that I would say the intelligence community quite rightly doesn't spend a lot of time looking at, so we count on outside experts to give us those insights. Once we determine what's going to happen to the biosphere and to the human beings, fallible carbon units who live in it, the next question is, well, what does that mean in terms of the way humans react? That's the second part of the issue, which is really kind of an analytical question. How will human beings react to the changing climate? And that's an area where we still use outside experts, but that's another area where a great deal of social modeling or integrating social behavior into the climate activity, which Jay talked about, would be fantastic to help us do our work. All right. Now for my science wish list in the remaining 15 seconds. When we went through the NIA, we were frustrated a little bit, although we had great people help us, in that we did not have the specificity that we really wanted to see what was going to happen around the world. The global circulation models from the IPCC chopped the world up into big sections. And we found ourselves wanting to deal much more with smaller geographic areas where I could really see what the impact would be on specific crops and understand what the crop substitution capabilities would be. So we wanted more detailed scaling, probably down to a 60-kilometer range for temperature, precipitation, winds, sea ice, and sea level, that would show us, as Jay talked about, the uncertainty that there really is in the climate, so we could look at the tails, because that's very, very important, and understand exactly, knowing the uncertainty and knowing it in a much smaller geographical area, what it might mean to the humans who live in that area. So hence we wanted the models to be statistically realistic with known confidence levels, and we wanted to look at it about a decade period of time. For water systems, we wanted more insight into water supply availability, rain, glacier melts, river flows and aquifers, and improved representations of glaciers and ice flows. And finally, we wanted to be able to take these models and understand how climate was going to impact crops, what the crop substitution capabilities were, and how ocean temperatures, changes in pH levels would affect fish stocks. And of course, for us in the developed world, it's critical that we understand what extreme weather events will do to infrastructure, what infrastructure is at risk, what we might do to protect it, And those are all the important questions that face us as we try and go forward. With those kind of understanding of those issues, we'd be in a much better position to judge the impacts of climate change on national security. Again, if you want to see the reports that we have done, if you Google National Intelligence Council, climate change 2030, I'm sure that it'll bring itself right up. Thank you very much.